Republican Congressman Keith Self of McKinney, thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Thank you, Jack.
We are speaking really as the vote for what President Trump has called his one big beautiful bill is still going on. You voted for it. Why?
I did because, look, there was the option of trying to send it back to the Senate. We went through every permutation with the Senate, looking at every single senator to see if there was any change. There was no option. So we went outside to find ways, because there's plenty of ways to save money and improve policy throughout the federal government. So last night we sent a list of requests to the White House, to the administration. And about 1 o'clock last night, we started the negotiations. 2 o'clock, they were done. I changed my vote from no to yes on the rule, and which freed up the bill to come to the floor. And today I voted yes, because we had to find some way to improve the fiscal situation and hopefully policy, but that's why. There was simply no way to get it back through the Senate.
I was just going to ask you about that because you were really one of only a handful of holdouts that kept the vote from taking place until early this morning, as you said. And my understanding is there are no changes to this bill. So did you win any concessions for the future?
Well, I'm not going to call them concessions. We made significant commitments, and some are in the fiscal area, some are in the policy area. Some of them we can talk about soon, some we cannot. But we got, particularly in the fiscal arena, we got a couple of major issues that I think will eventually pay off to reduce our fiscal problems that we have in this nation.
Is there anything that you can share with us now as far as what you just said? Fiscal, as far as the fiscal changes perhaps ahead?
Well, the big one I cannot, and I wish I could. So no, I think we're going to wait until we don't get ahead of the leadership.
So let me ask you, what was your biggest concern about the version that came back from the Senate and that ultimately you did vote for?
Well, there were numerous problems. The Senate took a hatchet to the House version of this bill. Let's just be honest. So they were all the way from adding $750 billion to the deficit and the debt over 10 years. There was policy issues in the Green New Scam. There was policy issues in the Medicaid area. Supposedly, all illegals are supposed to come off of Medicaid. But there was a caveat that allowed them to say there was no teeth in it, in other words. In the Green New Scam, they cut out 50% of the Green New Scam. We wanted to entirely cut it out. So those are a couple. We only defunded abortion services for 1 year, not 10 years. We didn't do anything to the funding for transgender surgeries for minors. So there were major policy issues, as well as that $750 billion minimum. If you add in the interest, that $750 billion goes over $1 trillion. Now that's a lot of money.
Was there anything in the Senate bill, not in the House bill, that you liked?
Yeah, the provider taxes for Medicaid, they actually did improve a little bit, but not much, not much.
And as far as tax cuts are concerned, did the Senate add to those as far as making permanent business tax cuts?
They did, and that was part of the cost, because they extended it to permanency over 10 years, and that's what it takes to be permanent, 10 years. We wanted 4 or 5, somewhere in that range. They went out to 10, which makes it permanent, which is part of the cost.
And so let me ask you, just going back to the energy, as far as wind and solar subsidies, tax incentives, et cetera, the Democrats are saying because those incentives and subsidies are going to be wound down and reduced or perhaps eliminated, that energy in Texas is going to end up costing more. What do you say to that?
I disagree with that. I reject that. In fact, the last minute, in fact, the White House didn't even know the Senate had put this in there. At the last minute before they voted on it, they put in a little one paragraph that basically gutted the Green New Scam, what was in the House version of the Green New Scam, gutted it for an additional year and said if you've got any construction, and that could be throwing a plank out on the ground, whatever. If you had any construction going, you've got an extra year. Now, whether or not people will see that as a certainty and invest their money, an open question. But the paragraph is in there that basically gutted the House version of the Green New Scam.
With regards to cuts to Medicaid, I was reading that nearly 12 million people may lose their coverage, according to the Congressional Budget Office, as far as the Senate plan is concerned. I've done a lot of reading about what's in, what's not in, as far as Medicaid cuts. These are cuts to the growth of the Medicaid program, not actual baseline cuts. Is that right?
That's the way a cut in Washington, D.C. is often defined, a cut in the growth. Very seldom do we cut back anything. So no, that is the classic definition of cuts in Washington, D.C.
And as far as these millions of people who are, may very well lose their coverage, what do you say to that? And is this, as part of this, the fact that the work requirements are higher now? There are work requirements. And as a result, some of the people who may lose coverage may not be in compliance. Is that right?
Well, this is one of the major cuts that we did achieve in the House bill and working with the entire House Republican Conference. $1 trillion out of Medicaid. Now, let's talk about those cuts and what they mean. Let's talk about illegals and let's talk about able-bodied adults. So the illegals are supposed to come off of Medicaid, but there is also no teeth to the Senate bill. There was teeth in the House bill, but there's no teeth in the Senate bill to force that to happen. On the able-bodied adults, this is a COVID provision that still lingers today. You can cash your government check, play your video games. You should be in the economy working, contributing to the economy, knowing the dignity and the value of work. And yet some able-bodied adults are on Medicaid simply cashing their government check when they could be working. That's the majority of what you're talking about there. We're not talking about the people who are supposed to be on Medicaid, pregnant women, children, disabled, and seniors. They will not see a cut.
But Democrats say that many of these people are working. They're on they have minimum wage jobs. They say these are the people who are going to be suffering. So what do you say to that? They've also said that this could very well be life or death for some people.
Well, that's hyperbole. That's very rhetorical because this is also going to lift all boats. We're focused on a very narrow, the Medicaid, and I've given you what the Medicaid should do, but we're going to lift all boats with a growing economy. That's the other side of this. And then you've also got to factor out the illegals who are self-deporting or being deported. Jobs are going to open up, especially at that level. So I don't see it as a problem. That's hyperbole.
And then with the record low as far as illegal immigration that we're seeing now, the headlines are coming out as far as last month. Well, I think only 6,000 people were apprehended at the border. Some are asking, why is it necessary to spend $45 billion on a border wall when we're seeing these low numbers?
Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, the tide has turned to go the other way. Let's just be honest. We're now seeing the tide go the other way as people are repatriated to their countries. The wall, President Trump will not be president except for the next 3 years. Who's going to be president next? That's why we need a border wall, because it could change on January the 20th of whatever year. That's the problem. We've got to, and that's the same thing with the EOs, the executive orders. We need to codify the wall by putting it up. We need to codify the executive orders by putting them into law, because who knows who's going to be the next president.
And with regards to these executive orders, the president has signed a lot of them. And so is now Congress's point of view, the Republicans trying to codify all of them, pass laws, make them all into law?
Well, we're picking and choosing, and the leadership is choosing which they want to do. But when you look at the vast number of injunctions that have been made against President Trump's EOs, executive orders, then that's why we need to codify the most important ones first. The leadership is lining them up, and that's how we're handling them. But frankly, we've been focused on the big, beautiful bill for so long. I would expect the stream of EOs codification bills to start again.
Two other questions, and I appreciate your time, and that is, you have made it a very big deal as far as your point of view, as far as making sure Congress actually passes all 12 spending bills. And so that's coming up. I would imagine that has to be done before October 1st when the new budget starts. And so do you expect that to actually happen?
Well, the timeline, first of all, the House is supposed to finish them by the end of June because the Senate has got to get them. All spending bills originate in the House, then they go to the Senate supposedly on 1 July. Here we are. And then they pass them in order so that we can get them back through the House if we have to do it again to the president's desk before 1 October. Now that's the timeline. No, I do not expect that timeline to happen. In fact, I don't expect all 12 bills to be passed. Hopefully we'll get 5, maybe 6 passed. But at the end of the year, we're looking at another continuing resolution. And we will be messaging hard against that because we need to do our work. We need to do our job passing 12 appropriations bills so that we get them done across the president's desk by 1 October.
And do you think that Democrats are going to actually make some gains because of this bill? I understand that you and other Republicans are quite pleased, the president, but Democrats, on the other hand, are not. And, they think that they have an opportunity here in next year's elections.
Well, frankly, now that the border is not nearly as much of an issue, the economy will be the issue. I believe it normally is on most elections. So the results of this big, beautiful bill, if it happens fast, remember that's the mistake they made in 2017. They didn't pass it till December. There was not enough time to impact the midterm elections. This time we've passed it to the president's desk by 4 July, 6 months earlier. So now we hope that the impact of the big, beautiful bill in every aspect has more time to take effect, and people will be feeling better about themselves, their pocketbook, their jobs, and generally America as a whole. That is the intent of the big, beautiful bill.
When does it go into effect? After the president's signature?
Correct.
Immediately then?
Well, there are different steps through it, but yes, it becomes law at the president's signature.
I did have one other topic to ask you about very quickly. As you know, Governor Abbott has called a special session for July 21st. It was reported several weeks ago in the New York Times that the president wants Governor Abbott to add to the call so that lawmakers can redraw the congressional districts in Texas to add to the number of Republicans in Congress. What have you heard about this, and is that something you would support?
Jack, I have no comment on that topic.
Okay, we will leave it there. Republican Congressman Keith Self of McKinney, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack.